Welcome everyone. Today we'll talk about emergency care and disaster management in this videos. So as stated, the what is disaster? What are the situation like in disasters? What are the relation between why does it happen and how does it happen and what leads to it happening it? So we need to understand the causes and the risk factor and the impact and cost thereof. So yes, we'll cover disaster situation, the cause and effect relationships, and the impact and the cause that goes around here. So to begin with, disaster, what exactly it is? It is a situation, nothing else but a situation which is overwhelming. The local capacity. When I say local capacity, forget individual capacity, even the community capacity that we're talking about it, necessitating a pull in demand for a national and international levels of assistance, external assistance, and that is what disaster is all about. It is beyond the capacity of an individual, community, or a group of a region to avert it. One, to come back to a normalcy in a short span of time. Two, and probably it causes a loss of damages to properties and life, which is of magnanimous scale. So it is beyond the purview of the local capacity thereby. So which means there would be a national disaster, national focus upon it, or an international focus around here. That is the definition which is given by International Emergency Disaster Database. Many disaster situations are human induced. For example, the insurgency, the militancy, the terrorism, the herdsman, the farmer conflict. It's a conflict between the man and the wild, which will always be there. The communal conflicts, obviously about based on race, religion, caste, creed, sex, God knows what many things, ethno-religious violences, militancy, human trafficking, the biggest business, underworld business that is growing across the world, which oftentimes results in a large number of people getting trapped into a desert or probably in a high sea in time and in need for emergency interventions. Then there is something called a building collapse, a flyover collapse, a fire disasters, and so on. So human induced disaster does not limit to themselves. There are high speed train colliding with one another. There are high speed trains colliding with a stationary train perhaps. There are mid-air accident with a plane. Something technical glitches can happen around it. So what are we talking about? We are talking about transport disaster. We're talking about pipeline explosion wherein you are passing in your gas or your petrol through the pipe and there is some miscreants doing some nuisances which leads to certain unwarranted situation. Chemical poisoning is a similar case. Political unrest and definitely yes is petrol tankers explosion. These are all human induced disaster which could have been avoided, disaster which we should as collectively should eliminate altogether. And then there are something called natural disaster, which are beyond the capacity of the local communities or even for a regional basis on a scale. It depends on the scale that it happens around here. We are talking about floods, we are talking about earthquake, land tremors, health related disaster like Ebola, Lassa fever, meningitis, cholera, avian flu. We have dengue, we have SARS, COVID. Mining disaster, definitely yes, it happens across the world. Miners get trapped in, miners get forget being trapped, being buried altogether. Landslide, gully erosions, windstorm, droughts, and these are natural disaster which we don't have much of a hand and probably much of an intervention mechanism thereby. So natural disasters are ocean surge, breach encroachment. Probably you see with the temperature rising of the planet, probably the glaciers are melting, and so does the level of sea. And then we have pest invasion, infestation. We have this locust coming in, Quella birds invasion, which is basically a struggle between man and the wild, if I may say so. And this is only a few examples that I've elaborated. There might be elephant encroaching into your farming land. There might be tigers encroaching into your farming lands, and so on and so forth. So post-disaster consequences, and probably this is the cost that we end up paying. What we're looking in terms of people, we lose lives. If we not lose life, we lose limbs. If we don't lose limbs, we lose movement. If we don't lose movement, we lose livelihood. Please understand this is of cross importance. internal displacement of people with public health consequences. Economy, macroeconomy, loss of gross domestic product, loss of business, capital flight, loss of stock, everything gets compromised. Ecology, loss of ecological resources, destruction of vegetations, and degradation of the natural and built-in environment, as the case might be. And that is what we should be talking around it, the post consequences, post disaster consequences, and the cost that we end up paying. There are, other than this, the socio-economic consequences to the business community. The business might be lost forever. The livelihood can be changed forever. The lives of the people can be shattered forever. So please understand, this is, we are talking about billions of uh, dollars everywhere. Losses of lives, destruction of farmland, shortage of food, drinking water, as you think the cases might be. Now, how do we spring back to normalcy? How do we come back to normalcy altogether? This is a very complex, multidimensional process. In fact, it has to have a multi-pronged approach to bring post-disaster situation to the level of normalcy, level of acceptability, through rectification, through damages, through rebuilding of lives. That is what we are looking for it. That is why people, society, community should look forward. It is also a process in which a disaster stricken process or area comes back to normalcy. Now, recovery includes what? We are talking not only physical environment in terms of building, forget building, network, towers, forget towers, powers, power installation. These needs to be understood. The road, the bridges, the water, the schools, the community centers, the health centers, the medical facilities. So yes, everybody has to chip in. Come provincial government, come federal government, must be restored. Restoration of security and sources of sustainable livelihood. Supporting of vulnerable groups, risk reduction community, participation in the environmental protection as on when on basis. We'll talk about the post-disaster recovery needs assessment. It is a framework and approach to assess post-disaster needs that has been applied in several countries globally. We are talking of PDNA, post-disaster need assessment. This is what we are talking about it. It has only two mechanisms. One is the human recovery covers, and the next is the damages and the loss that we need to that we have incurred in properties needs to be assessed. So human recovery need assessment and damage loss needs assessment. That is what we are talking about, HRNA and DALA. So together the two streams, the human resource need assessment and the damage and loss need assessment, what are we looking into? Forms a recovery roadmap to achieve resilient recovery, reconstruction of physical assets, restorations of service delivery, access to global goods, services, governance, social process, reduction of risk, and building back better environment. Why I say better? Because if things have been destroyed through earthquake, we need to build back resilient roads, resilient bridges, resilient buildings, resilient towers. That is what we should be looking at. If it has been shaken, forshaken, or sort of by floods and tsunamis, we need to take care. Such events are going to happen in future, but such magnanimous loss should be avoided. And that is what we are looking at, a road to recovery, which is building back in a better fashion. Now we talk about the emergency care and what can be done during the emergency, as the case might be. The tracking of post-disaster recovery process using earmarked indicators to ensure successful completion. It also refers to the process of systematic continual observation, recording of data on evolutions and occurrence of hazards and disaster, management initiatives, whether it is planned or otherwise, with which the hazards or disasters have been handled is of utmost importance. Tracking activities, events during with the intention of improving disaster management in the future. This third definition is in context which probably I'll base my discussion in this video of monitoring and evaluation specifically towards the health aspects post disaster in line with the objective of capacity building programs, as the case might be. This is what we are talking about in terms of emergency care, the tracking, the post disaster recovery process. Recovers, it's a process of systematically, continually observing, recording, and improving, building back better based on the data that we recover on the evolution part. So why emergency care? To ensure health recovery objectives. Yes, the community should be built back better. people should not be facing any sort of health issues. In fact, there is a loss of confidence which we need to do it, build it, rebuild it on time and within stipulated budget. A means to track activities and results of post-disaster health program, to provide accountability and assist an ongoing health recovery on ground as we speak. How do we go ahead to improve future aid policy? Without accountability and maximum impact on the use of funds, donors will be discouraged. Hence, the needs for monitoring and evaluation takes a precedence. That is the reason why emergency care is required, not only for health benefit, but also for accountability of the health benefits, where the money is flowing, how it is benefiting, can be streamlined and probably ensure that the last penny is having the best of impact. Marginal benefit analysis is to be done. Future aid policy will depend on what we have actually done previously and how it has benefited the community. What are the objectives of emergency care? Is to promote understanding of hazards on rescuers, health workers, and disaster affected people. That is what is required to facilitate informed forecast and preparedness, as disasters have tendency for recurrences every now and then. To promote disaster awareness, especially in terms of health recovery program. Remember, if, in cases of natural disasters or calamities, there are first responders. The first responders may not be a trained medical practitioner, but be a person who is staying nearby in the vicinity, who's available in the vicinity. They should also be trained to make sure that they are being provided with a basic healthcare facilities or healthcare actions, to coordinate participatory partnership among stakeholders, have form a comprehensive resource mobilization. When I say talk about resource mobilization, am I talking only about money? Probably no. Am I talking only about medicine? Probably no. I'm talking also about the food. I'm also talking about the water. I'm also talking about the power, electricity. I'm also talking about network communication. That is what comprehensive resource mobilization is all about. It, remember, it is that data that we are building as we gather the recovery process. For every event we build a data, we try to build a heat map and try to predict or probably understand how it can be utilized in a better perspective in the next unfortunate disaster. That is what the course of action will be based upon. It, operation that needs recovery in a post-disaster health recovery system is most critical, and that should be monitored but not limited to the following: the entire rescue operation, rescue equipment, emergency medical system, the airlifting of the victims, the providing of medical services either at the site of the disaster or at the medical facilities or the hospitals we are talking about. It, including after normalcy, PTSD or post-traumatic psychological stress disorder, if I may say so. Now, these are needs to be monitored, ensured, so that they meet at least minimum standards of the best practices. Resource mobilization is what we are accumulating in for the disasters, accumulating from the public, from the society, from the community, from the government. The utilization thereof is very critical to the success of health recovery programs. Hence, the need of proper monitoring. Hence, the need of proper accountability, because this will only lead to a better utilization. Yes, we are talking about capacity building for all categories of health workers, be it surgeon, pediatrician, environmental, sanitary health worker, epidemiologist, nutritionists, reproductive health workers, pharmacists, psychiatrists, you name it, and the list goes on and on, should be closely monitored to ensure that they provide the right knowledge, they provide the right skill, they provide the right attitude when they are approaching such emergency situation. So, level of knowledge and compliance to international, perhaps even regional conventions, agreement treaties such as United Nations, Kampala conventions, in dealing with disaster affected persons, as persons who have lost their livelihood, also in need of medical care, they by national, international humanitarian laws entitled to every medical and other forms of assistance, every form of assistance, because the compliance to the laws should be monitored and people should be made accountable, and because that will only streamline the process and enrich the next unfortunate disaster that might be waiting to happen, and we will be able to recover back to normalcy much faster and much quicker. With this, I come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching this video till the end.